Sudanese novel History and Development, Leila Aboulela, 1964, Kindness of Enemies. The audience, it is a new episode and our series documenting the Sudanese novel History and Development will continue today. In our encounter with Leila Aboulela, today we would like to go further, introducing practically one of her celebrated literary texts, Kindness of Enemies. So in our fourth encounter with her, we would like to experience together Kindness of Enemies, which in fact is one of her finest outstanding novel. So our focus will be on the religious and Sufi dimensions embedded in the structure of the novel, not merely as cultural background, but as a dynamic force shaping events, guiding perspectives, and forming the inner struggles of its characters. Among the central ideas explored in the novel is the concept of true and real jihad, as embodied in the experience of Imam Shamil, the Dagestani leader who led a historical resistance grounded in profound spiritual and ethical principles. In the narrative, jihad transcends its narrow military meaning to become a struggle of the self, ego, striving against ego and desire, a patience in the face of trial, and a steadfast commitment to moral convention. And here, Sufi vision emerges clearly. The greater battle is not only fought on the battlefield, but within the depths of the human heart.
İmanından güç alır o dağların çocuğu. Eğmez kafire boyun yalnız Allah'ın kulu. Hece hece alnına şehit yazan bir adam.
So the audience, this is our fourth encounter with Leila Aboulela, and we would like to travel with her, we would like to experience with her the true meaning of jihad as she has been expressed in the novel Kindness of Enemies. So for this, I'm so very happy to welcome you, and together we would like to go further in our discussion, taking these literary texts to show the real meaning of jihad. So our focus will be on the religious and Sufi dimensions embedded in the structure of the novel, not merely as cultural background, but as a dynamic force shaping events, guiding perspectives, and forming the inner struggles of its characters. Among the central ideas explored in the novel is the concept of real and true jihad, as embodied in the experience of Imam Shamil, the Dagestani leader who led a historical resistance grounded in profound spiritual and ethical principles. In the narrative, jihad transcends its narrow military meaning to become a struggle of the self, striving against ego and desire, a patience in the face of trial, and a steadfast commitment to moral convention. And here, the Sufi vision emerges clearly. The greater battle is not only fought on the battlefield, but within the depths of the human heart. Throughout this episode, we will explore how Leila Aboulela reinterprets history through a spiritual framework and how she employs narrative art to highlight Sufi values such as asceticism, tolerance, and generosity of spirit, even toward one's enemies, as expressions of elevated faith. We will also reflect on the interplay between the personal and the political, the intimate and the historical, woven together in a narrative fabric that harmonizes artistic sensitivity with spiritual depth. So once again, I welcome the audience, and we hope this journey into the kindness of enemies offers an opportunity to reflect on the meaning of heroism, the boundaries of resistance, and the manifestations of mercy as the heart of conflict. Aboulela fifth novel, Kindness of Enemies, is a contemporary novel which tackles issues of religion in parallel with the complexities of modern day life. Wonderfully, Aboulela travels through time and continents to take her readers from Scotland, Sudan to the Caucasus, incorporating history in her work, in which she gives a sufficient background about the religion of Islam and its values with authentic details and vivid description. She succeeded in covering 2 centuries in this work. In Kindness of Enemies, Leila Aboulela recalls history to present a compelling portrait of what may be understood as authentic jihad, struggle rooted in faith, moral convention, and the defense of one's homeland. Published in 2015, Kindness of Enemies depicts the story of half-Russian, half-Sudanese professor who embarks on a journey to document the life of a Muslim historical figure, Imam Shamil, who gained notoriety through his leading role in the anti-Russian resistance movement of the Caucasian War, set in 2010. The book also tackles the theme of life of the Muslim in the post-September 11 era. The novel foregrounds the experience of Imam Shamil, the 19th century leader of Dagestan, who resisted Russian imperial expansion with a vision shaped not only by military resistance, but also by deep spiritual discipline. Through this historical narrative, Kindness of Enemies explores jihad as both an outward struggle to protect community and belief, and an inward striving for ethical integrity and steadfastness in the face of overwhelming force. I was interested in Imam Shamil for quite some time. I wrote a radio play about him, and I was interested in what he did. he reunited the tribes of the Caucasus and announced jihad against Russian expansion. Aboulela said in an interview with the Arab Weekly. To quote her further, in the interview that had been carried out with her in Arab Weekly, I was interested in him. Leila Aboulela, he pointed out to Imam Shamil al-Dagestani. I was interested in him fighting jihad from a Sufi aspect. This kind of jihad is different from what we see practiced by ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Imam Shamil was eventually exiled in Moscow. He didn't fight until death. He accepted peace and he accepted he lost the war, Aboulela said. Meanwhile, the author, the novelist, Leila, described how when he went to Russia, the Imam marveled at the advances of the Russians had achieved, and he admired the Christian compassion towards him and his family. So what I would like to add in this particular context, that Sufism in the 19th century played a significant role in supporting and motivating Imam Shamil and the highland fighters to keep up the resistance and fight back against the Russian occupation. So to quote Leila further in this particular context, only the spirit was left. This is from the original text, by the way. Only the spirit was left, and which belonged to Allah and was created to be free as the eagles that circle the mountains. So Abouleila's writings take a Sufi form. For her, the retain of mystical approaches to history is necessary because it allows a view of both the past and the future as fixed, determined by the divine, thus barring the secular mind from its assumed dominance. In an interview with Rashid, to quote her, Islamic individualism and the logic narratives. Aboulela declares Sufism and Sharia are one as they complete each other. Aboulela illustrates that when she incorporates both notions in her fiction writings, for her the inner moral development of her characters is not so much a Christian or secular paradigm as analogous with the plot of Sufi traveler. So as you follow the audience in this historical novel, Sufism is present, and at the same time it has been used so as to provide an example of a true Muslim jihad fighter, that is Imam Shamil al-Dagestani. And by the way, this is just a recognition that throughout history, Sufis engage in a true battle, an authentic jihad against the enemy. However, Leila is celebrated this figure among the Sufi tradition. Literary elements. In this part of the episode, the audience, I would like just to share the literary elements that make up the novel. So the genre here is novel. Here we have Kindness of Enemies is classified as novel, and in fact it has been written in English, as we have stated in our second encounter with Leila Aboulela that Leila has written her works in English, and this is just due to her command to English language. In this concern, the novel Kindness of Enemies has been written in English and has been translated into Arabic by Professor Badruddin al-Hashimi. About the characters, in fact, in the novel here, the novels run between contemporary characters and historical ones. Yet, all the characters meet at a common point. The contemporary characters are Natasha, Uz or Osama, and Malak. And the historical ones are Imam Shamil, Jamaluddin, and Anna. So, by the way, these are the major characters as you listen. Part of them historical figures such as Imam Shamil, and parts of them, moreover, is contemporary figures or characters, and that is, for example, represented in Natasha as an example. About the setting, in fact, the settings is here is has the event has taken place in different situations and different locations. For example, we experience the events of the novels, part of the events of the novel in Scotland, part of the events in Sudan, and parts of the event in Caucasus. So in that regard, the Kindness of Enemies follows two timelines. That, in terms of time, that's of Natasha, who teaches at the Scottish University, and that of her 19th century research about Imam Shamil al-Daghestani. As the novel opens, Natasha gives a talk to the Muslim society on jihad as resistance. As resistance, Russian imperial expansion and instruction in the Caucasus. She visits Malak, mother of one of her students, Uz or Osama, and descendant of Imam Shamil, the Islamic warrior who led the fight against the Russian. Moreover, Kindness of Enemies runs two stories in parallel. The present day, Natasha Wilson, born in Khartoum as Natasha Hussein to a Russian mother and a Sudanese father, is an academic working at the Scottish University. Her field of study is the campaign of resistance led by Sufi Imam Shamil against Russia in the 19th century. Natasha spends time in the home of one of her students, Oz or Osama, and his mother Malak, who are descendants of Imam Shamil. About the themes or central ideas, Sufism in Kindness of Enemies functions on multiple levels as historical context shaping the life and decisions of Imam Shamil, as personal spirituality guiding Malak and influencing Natasha, another thematic framework for exploring ideas of further of inner spirituality or struggle, identity, exile, and belonging, making Sufism integral to both the novel structure and its deeper emotional and philosophical resonance. The kindness of Enemies has been widely studied for its discussion of multiple themes such as diaspora, migration, cultural identity, and religion. Moreover, jihad and Sufism beside Islamophobia is one of the ideas and central points that the writer tries to share her readers. In the present day storyline center on Natasha, historian in Scotland, Sufism enters through the character. Her characters, Aboulela, seeks to clarify the ambiguities related to Islam and how to fight the stereotypes regarding Muslims and the concept of jihad that was and still be an integral part of the Muslim faith, stepping stone in shaping the Muslim's self-identity. Take for instance Natasha. Aboulela discusses the struggles that migrants face in recognizing their identity and keeping up with where they came from, their origins in exile, and their belongings. When it comes to Osama, the novel offers a prime example about the difficulties Muslims encounter in the Western world, and how they misinterpret the word jihad and associate it with Al-Qaeda. So as you listen, the audience in this part of the episode, just here we have the interaction between the characters within the text itself and their discussion to the real meaning of jihad. And in fact, here as we told, Leila Aboulela told that she followed the way of writing her literary text in English in order to show another image of our identity, of our creed to the British or to the Western world in general. And in this regard, as you follow, here we living the experience of her characters debating a very important and significant issue, mainly throughout 2000, at the beginning of 2000 and by the end of 1990s. The speech on Islam and terrorism, the speech of Islam and jihad is so dominant in the Western media. As a result of that image, which had been reflected by the fighter, the extremist fighters who try always to tell the audience that they represent the true Islam. So Leila, throughout this literary text, tries to show another image, and here she focused greatly on the real meaning of jihad, represented in the dialogue that has been taken place between her characters in the story.
Beyaz gömlek üstünde çiçekten düğmeleri, beyaz karlar içinde açar kar çiçekleri, soğuk karlar üstünde Assena'nın izleri, soğuk karlar içinde açar.
Moreover, the novel also emphasizes the point of family division as a consequence of force and colonization. To some extent, it leads the characters to an unknown fate and uncertainty about one's real self and identity. Natasha moves to Britain with her mother, leaving behind her childhood friends and her native homeland, and her left alone father. As for Jamal ad-Din, by the way, he is the son of Imam Shamil, another character. He flees his father, Imam Shamil, when he is kidnapped by the Russians. Princess Anna, who is also a captive of Imam Shamil, finds herself in a different new world, which has tremendously caused confusion about her identity. Through this enigmatic social dislocation, Aboulela wants to relate modernity with tradition and to introduce a new real concept of jihad, which is strikingly different from the Western's conception of it usually used against Muslims. So, kindness of enemies is found there. With the three captivated figures, that is Anna, part of Imam Shamil community, has been imprisoned have been imprisoned. And then we have Jamaluddin, that is the son of Imam Shamil himself, have been captured by the Russian and spent many times with them. At the same time, here we have Natasha, half Sudanese, half Russian. So here we have the speech on identity, and at the same time, here we may mainly with the two examples, that is the example of Jamaluddin with the Russian and Anna with the Muslims, Imam Shamil and his community. Jamaluddin with the Christian there, with the Russian. So here we find out the compassion and the kindness of the enemy in a situation. If you have taken, for example, Anna, how it used to be treated, and then Jamaluddin, how is he also be treated. So here we find and we reach to the real meaning of the kindness. The audience, I would like to reminding you that I'm presenting Leila Aboulela in our fourth encounter with her, introducing her masterpiece novel, Kindness of Enemies. So one of the central historical figures in the novel is Imam Shamil, portrayed explicitly as a Sufi leader. His Sufism influences how his jihad struggle is understood. Shamil's resistance against Russian expansion isn't depicted as aggressive conquest, but as a defensive struggle rooted in spiritual and communal duty, an interpretation often aligned with traditional Sufi ethics, emphasizing inner discipline and moral conduct, not violence for its own sake. So in this part of the episode, I would like to share some notes or some ideas about who is Imam Shamil. And what I would like to share is real biography, part of the real biography of Imam Shamil himself. So Imam Shamil, 1797-1871, was a Muslim political, military, and spiritual leader from Dagestan in the Northern Caucasus. He is best known for leading the resistance against the expansion of the Russian Empire during 19th century war against the Russian. Born in the village of Gemri in Dagestan, Imam Shamil was educated in Islamic scholarship and was deeply influenced by Sufi teachings, particularly the Naqshbandi order. His leadership combined religious authority with military strategy. In 1834, he became the Imam, leader of the Caucasus people, uniting various Muslim tribes of Chechnya, Dagestan under a common cause. For nearly 25 years, he organized and led a sustained resistance against Russian forces. His struggle was framed not only as a defense of territory, but also as a defense of faith, law, Sharia, and communal independence. Imam Shamil became renowned for his discipline and moral authority. In 1859, after years of warfare and increasing pressure from the Russian forces, he surrendered to the Russians. He was later allowed to live in exile and eventually perform Hajj. He died in 1871 in Medina Munawwara. Imam Shamil remains a significant historical and symbolic figure in the Caucasus, remembered both as a military commander and a spiritual leader who embodied the fusion of faith and resistance.
Elde çiçek tozları kalbime sıcak bakın. Toplanın etrafına, kalemler obamızın. Beyaz gömlek üstünde çiçekten düğmeleri, beyaz karlar içinde açar kar çiçekleri. Soğuk karlar üstünde Assenan izleri, soğuk karlar içinde açar kar çiçekleri.
In just I have provide short notes about Imam Shamil al-Dagestani story life. It has been taken, as I told, this is maybe regarded or treated as formal biography, and he has been introduced in the novel as a historical religious leader. Moreover, in the novel, Shamil was a faithful man and was spiritually strong. So this is as has been portrayed in the novel Kindness of Enemies. He believes that everything happened to him was Allah will. The latter helped him to have the patience for 15 years of the loss of his son. Shamil kidnapped the princess of Georgia, Anna, to exchange her by his son. He treated her as a guest instead of a hostage. She stayed at his household with his wives. So kindness of enemies is found there in the way that the hostage, how he used to be or how she used to be treated by the enemy. Here we experience how Anna, the Georgian, how used to be treated by Imam Shamil community. And as we have listened, she used to be treated as a guest, not as a hostage. Meanwhile, kindness of enemies is there when Imam Shamil himself has been captured by the Russian. He spoke out that the Russian treated him in good way, in a compassionate way, as a Christian. And this is what I thought the writer and the novelist Leila tries to show and tries to reflect in her writing, that the prisoners in all cases ought to be respected, ought to be treated as guests, not to be killed, not to be tortured. And this is the ethics of Islam, and this is the ethics of the Prophet of Islam. Throughout the battles that Muslims have engaged against the enemy. So Shamil, the fighter, was a kind, moral, religious person who loved children and who was respectful to his teacher. After the back of his son, Shamil has a mixture of feelings. From one hand, he was happy to see his son again. From the other hand, he was sad because his son has changed a lot on the level of faith. Afterwards, Jamaluddin falls ill and died. Shamil lost his son again and forever. Shamil was obliged to stop fighting and surrender himself to the Russians to protect his family and the villagers. He was noble in his defeat.
Su bekliyor pınarlar, çınarlar tarih saklı. Çiçekleri yoldular, toprağın gözyaşlı. Su bekliyor pınarlar, çınarlar tarih saklı. Çiçekleri yoldular, toprağın gözyaşlı. Bak şu yağan yağmura, dedem korkut ağlıyor. Batıdan esti rüzgar, töremi baltalıyor. Bak şu yağan yağmura, dedem korkut ağlıyor. Batıdan esti rüzgar, töremi baltalıyor.
Another feature that have been portrayed in the novel, Kindness of Enemies, is that relationship between the teacher and disciple. So Aboulaila's interest in the teacher-disciple dynamic is taken a step further in Kindness of Enemies through the parallel narratives of Shamil and Natasha, whose interrelated stories are separated by a time span of over 200 years. The former's spiritual teacher is called Sheikh Jamaluddin Husseini, the gentle Sufi scholar. So as you listen here, we have we have the teacher-disciple relationship, and in this context, we taken the example here, Imam Shamil with his teacher, Imam Shamil as the student, to his spiritual guide and teacher, the Naqshbandi Sheikh Jamaluddin Husseini. And we are informed that Shamil had soaked up the Sheikh Sufi teachings, eager for enlightenment, eager for the grace and strength that came from the Creator. This, by the way, direct quotation from the novel itself. Together with his friend Qazi Muhammad Al-Girmawi, they had known that perfection could not be reached without the instructions of a master. They were seekers, and Sheikh Jamaluddin their spiritual guide. Moreover, this is also direct quotation from the novel. So based on this quotation, Imam Shamil with his friend Qazi Muhammad believed that the perfection, and the perfection here ought to be understood in the way of the perfect man, represented here, the notion of the perfect man, by the way. Perfect man is a Sufi concept, indicates the realization of the excellent attributes on the figure or on the person himself. So here, Qazi and Imam Shamil have their belief that the perfection could not be reached without the instructions of a master. And here we have the notion of teacher-disciple relationship. So the matter of guidance is so essential in that way. And the spiritual guide is so very important. That is because he represents human experience, the way of spirituality. And in this case, Imam Shamil has this strong belief that there must be a spiritual guide for the individual in that sense. However, the resistance of Imam Shamil was strongly spiritual and empowered by spirituality. For Aboulela, the fact that his political actions were guided by spirituality, it resulted in disciplined politics and a strong sense of determination. It is an important portion that the novel seems to convey equally to contemporary jihadists, whose resistance is described as no more than terrorism, and to contemporary Sufis whose struggle is purely spiritual. Shamil's ability to challenge the Russians with the little material he possesses is nothing but an indication that emphasizes the spiritual dimension of his military resistance that he inspired from his faith in Sufism. Meanwhile, his steadfastness in his battle against the Russian no longer continues as it has started. For Shamil's last defeat was a consequence of his arrogance and his high esteem because his belief in his teacher's spirituality weakened. He rendered everything to mysticism which he did not believe in. Jamal ad-Din said, You began to believe in your own abilities, and you said to yourself, what the dervish understands besides mysticism. Direct quotation from the writer. In those difficult moments of spiritual beliefs, Jamaluddin relinquished to circumstances and stopped praying for Shaman's victory. Hence, he was ultimately defeated. Shaman's own convention of such a defeat was attributed to his lack of spiritual support and a right sense of devotion, to quote from the text. Without spiritual support, nature took its course. Without blessings, without miracles, and one made two, and one made two. An object thrown up in the air fell down. A man couldn't see in the dark. Fire burned and bodies needed food. Without blessings, without miracles, the physical laws of the world govern supreme, and those strong in numbers and ammunition sooner or later must defeat the weak.
Dökülürken üstüme annemin gözyaşları, zindan karanlığını ateş böceği sardı. Dökülürken üstüme annemin gözyaşları, zindan karanlığını ateş böceği sardı. Elde çiçek tozları kalbime sıcak bakır, toplanın etrafına kalender obalı.
In discussion to the real and true meaning of jihad, Malak argues that jihad is an inner struggle that needs spiritual guide, like her grandfather Imam Shamil, who was fighting to save his homeland, family and his villagers against the brutal Russians. He fought for the religions and traditions. If not, and here I'm quoting from Malak, if not, he would have lost everything. In the sense that fighting was his duty, not something he had chosen. Malak told her son that the door of the real jihad is closed long time ago, because jihad needs an imam, and there is no imam now. She explains, jihad is not for land or wealth, not for power and political issues, but it is to follow the values of Allah and the rules of Sharia. Malak sheds light on the fact that not every Muslim war is jihad, not suicide bombers or attacking civilians. She draws attention on the fact that the real jihad is totally different from what the contemporary extremists claim it to be, and that jihad is innocent from the crimes committed by those extremists. Thus, kindness of enemies gives a peaceful image of Islam and jihad to aid people understand the differences between the real meaning of jihad. In a way, does not devolve in stereotypes and racial assumptions. It urges people to respect the other's beliefs and culture for the sake of reconciliation and coexistence in a complex world. The audience, we experience together one of significant and central ideas that Leila Aboulela, in her writing, in her literary text, Kindness of Enemies novel, tries to discuss. And in fact, as you follow, I focus on one point, and that is the real meaning of jihad, or what is behind jihad itself, based on authentic and true Muslim understandings to the teachings of Islam. And we have experienced through this historical novel how the novelist has reflected the true meanings of jihad. Taken the good example of Imam Shamil of Dagestan, who faced the Russian with the strong belief of a fighter representing the true Sufi, fighting in the name of Islam, in the name of his nation, against the aggression of the Russians. And Imam Shamil, by the way, is only one example of the true Muslims who fight for the sake of religion, for the sake of Islam. And here, our memory, a historical memory, is so filled with great warriors that fought the enemy in the name of Islam and religion, to defend the religion, to defend the homeland. So the audience, before to wrap up here, I would like to wrap up the episode. I would like to point out the sources that already have consulted. Shahina Smith Wood, Abouleila's The Kindness of Enemies, a saga of thematic and moralistic evocations, face, fate, and family divisions. Dissertation submitted to the Department of Letters and English Language in partial fulfillment of the requirements for master's degree in literature and civilization. 2019, Algeria, University of Muhammad Boudiaf. Another source is cbooks.com, The Kindness of Enemies. Another source, Qantara. And here we have an article, book review, Kindness of Enemies, Leila Aboulela. Crisis, Identity and Loyalty, Scotland Caucus. Another article, Finding Home Beyond Borders, Sufism and Homelessness, in Leila Aboulela's writing, by the researcher Emil Zorologo Akabi, published paper on 2024. The Kindness of Enemies by Leila Aboulela, a review, yavonspence.com. And finally, The Impact of Sufism on Arts in Sudan, published book by Abdel Abdullah Saleh, 2024, by Musawarat for publication and distribution. By this, the audience, I came to the end of the episode, till seeing you in another encounter with Leila Aboulela. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.